So you have to see the whole picture and make a decision based on your research and what you believe is true.
If you have preconceived ideas and you're just trying to fit what you believe in into what you find out, then you won't get to the truth. You most likely will end up trying to fit your ball of notion into the square hole of reality.
The salami lid ain't gonna fit like that.
That's why it's important that when you're doing research, you're open to the fact that you can be wrong, that your initial beliefs, or at least parts of it, or a huge part of it, can be wrong. You must be ready to dismantle your belief system, not desperately clinging onto parts that don't make sense and cannot withstand scrutiny. Mapagpalang araw sa inyong lahat. As promised, I'm doing a longer video on Joyce Pring's Adulting Podcast number 166, Unpacking Christianity. Unfortunately, I can't react to the whole episode because it's too long. So to keep this video short, I filtered the latter part and chose several claims and statements that, as of the moment, I think are the most important to respond to. So just to clarify, as a fellow believer, I do agree with Joyce to some extent, such as the doctrine of Trinity, how important it is to have the same core value with someone you intend to marry. I guess what really got to me were her presentation of the doctrine of hell, or how non-believers will suffer for eternity.
Forever?
And Universalism, which we will get to in a bit. In case you don't know who Joyce Pring is, she's apparently a Christian Filipino TV personality who is very vocal about her beliefs that she insists are rooted in the Bible, including how non-believers will face perpetual judgment in hell.
This is fine.
And Joyce is very far from being on her own. In fact, the majority of Christians do believe in eternal damnation, including my past self, because I used to believe that as well. Eternal damnation, a doctrine that was, quite interestingly, take note, not a widely held belief for the first 5 centuries after Christ, particularly in the Eastern Church, the Church of the early apostles, and arguably by the Church Fathers, including Paul, Clement of Alexandria, Saint Gregory of Nyssa, Origen, and others.
You don't think they should be forgiven or have, given a second chance?
Yeah, isn't God a loving God? Isn't He an infinite fountain of kindness to every human being? Isn't He forgiving and all these wonderful things? So how can God allow perdition, as Joyce Pring claims, as a lot of Christians claim? Isn't God love? If He is love, can He hate? Oh, you can say God loved Jacob and hated Esau. Then why did Jacob eventually saw the face of God in Esau's face, in the face of his enemy? And aside from love, isn't God a holy God? God is holy. Will He build an eternal prison designed for every unbeliever? Will He fill it with beings created after His own image and likeness, and there they will continue to rebel and suffer forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever?
Oh my gosh, that is so brutal.
That's brutal. God is holy, just, righteous, etc. But in His word, He's never called holiness or justice or etc. The list goes on, independently, as He is called love. Love seems to be the main essence of His divine nature. All other attributes are refinements of love, ways so that He could reveal His love more. Will He then permit a man to be born knowing he will be tormented forever?
This is honestly something that I really struggle with, and I really honestly wish that there's a different answer to this.
As I'd mentioned before in one of my shorts, there is a different answer. A different but obvious answer that has been buried under mistranslations. For example, the word aionion, which just means age, is wisely translated eternal to support the doctrine of eternal lake of fire, of eternal punishment. Remember, the mistranslations lead to misinterpretations. And that's the point of going to the original text, isn't it? Of doing exegesis.
That, anybody can go to heaven. But I think what makes Christianity beautiful is that you don't have to work for heaven. Jesus already did that for you. And so the only thing that you have to really realize is accept that gift.
Well, yes, Anybody can go to heaven. And the best part of it is you don't have to work for it. I don't see any contradiction in that. But apparently for Joyce, they do hold a contradiction. And not anybody can go to heaven. Christianity has become an exclusive club where if you were not chosen or elected, if God hardened your heart, then you will suffer for eternity in hell. A very fair move by a very fair God.
Okay.
Let's say, for example, we are in a courtroom, right? And God is the judge and you're the criminal. Would God be a good judge if he just said, okay, sige, wag na. Killed someone and you're like, okay, you're free to go. But what Christianity says happens is Jesus comes in and says, okay, Will deserves to be in jail. But instead of Will going to jail, I'll be in jail for his sake. That's what Christ did on the cross.
I think she was trying to talk about how there's no such thing as double jeopardy. Classic Christian rebuttal. She confused jail with prison now. Assuming she meant prison. Let's go back to the first part of the clip where Will mentioned second chances.
Doesn't God always give people second chances?
Here's another classic Christian rebuttal. So when you ask, how can God be a loving God if he's sending all non-believers to hell? They would answer, I used to answer, well, because God is just. Even though he loves, he must also do something to bring about justice, Also, God is wrath. But how is God just? Is his justice the same as humans? When we humans say justice, we immediately think of a balancing scale. But in Amos 5:24, the symbol for God's justice is a river, living, not static, but let justice run down like a river.
Okay, what about this? What about, I'm from Mindoro, and the natives, like the Mungyan tribe, they're not Christian, and they never had a chance to become Christian because they're indigenous peoples.
I also have asked this question, by the way. Yeah, especially like people who are super off the grid.
So don't you think kawawa sila that they don't even know anything about Christianity? It's not their fault. Why would they go to hell?
Yeah, so there are Christians like Universalist. I think that's what you call them, Universalist Christians, right? Where they say that as long as you believe that there is a God, that you'll go to heaven.
I'm a Christian Universalist, and this isn't what I believe in. I believe that all will be saved, eventually. Even those who don't believe there's a God. So even atheists.
Nice.
That's how powerful God's love is. It is his will that all be saved, not lost. Exactly what the parables of the lost teach. And at the end of the ages, every knee will bow down to him. I was kind of expecting her to mention heathenism here, because it's a classic Christian rebuttal, but she doesn't. And you know how it's a person's fault for not having positive volition or stuff like that. It's a person's fault for not opening that pathway for God to reveal himself to them. So hence, God cannot respond to someone whom he knows would reject him eventually anyway. Instead, she mentions universalism. And I'm really curious at how Joyce came up with her narrow, oversimplified, and ultimately misleading definition. So, being one who has claimed to have researched comprehensively,
I've done all the research.
Let's see what a quick Google search gives us. Christian Universalism is a school of Christian theology focused around the doctrine of universalism reconciliation. The view that all humans will ultimately be saved and restored to a right relationship with God. Christian Universalism and the belief of hope in the universal reconciliation through Christ, who hold that eternal damnation is the ultimate fate of everyone, or most people are sometimes called infernalists. You learn something new every day. Joyce Pring is an infernalist, and as Will Desovich has indirectly pointed out, her God is a God of brutal things.
So where do you think the Mungyan people, my people, where do you think they're headed? Do you think they're headed straight to hell?
Again, I don't know. I'm not the judge. But according to the Bible, the only way to heaven is with a relationship with God.
I can't judge, but I'm not judging. But there's always that but.
Maybe the guy who wrote it back in the day, had some slight... No one's perfect.
Probably.
So maybe he had some slight of judgment when he wrote that sentence.
Yeah.
She's just like, yeah. Didn't even mention canonicity and the integrity of the Bible as the infallible word revealed to us by God.
I think these are valid questions and valid experiences that people have. And that's why the calling of Christians is to share the gospel, right? Share this good news.
The Great Commission. Christ's commission. We are called to share the good news. That's what we need to focus on. Don't get distracted by other issues, even if the Bible talks about it. Don't try to dig into it. Don't try to learn it. Don't try to study it. Just focus on the part where we need to spread the good news. That's basically her point. But what is good news? You say the gospel. Which gospel? The gospel of the kingdom of God. The gospel of Christ. The gospel of God. The age-lasting gospel. The gospel of the grace of God. The Apostle Paul's gospel. Which gospel?
What we should be paying attention to and taking responsibility for is our own actions and our own journey, instead of creating these situations in our heads where, how about this person? How about this?
It's a dodge. It's a dodge.
No, and I've asked these questions so many times, but I've arrived at this conclusive thing that I believe in Christianity, I believe in Christ. Honestly believe that I've done all the research and all my due diligence in understanding it from all aspects, and I believe in it so much, even the hard parts to believe.
Wow. That's a very bold claim to make. Due diligence. Seems to me like due negligence. I don't know what else to say aside from, with this kind of attitude, there will be no room for proper discourse. It's crazy and sad. We've seen this very same attitude from other Christians as well, even pastors, especially online, where instead of having healthy discussions, respectfully disagreeing, as Joyce Pring mentions, instead of being like the Bereans who studied the word and weighed out the validity of doctrines, these Christians, in reality, will just block and ban their own brethren. But y'all remember, if you cannot defend your doctrine, as one by one the loopholes are being exposed, you'll just be riding your own horse of self-righteousness, putting yourself in a higher ground. I'm better. I'm just gonna ignore the critics. It doesn't matter, you know? They're not worth my time. Ostracize my own brethren, and they would claim and whine about being persecuted. It's crazy and very, very sad, I'll have to admit. Breaks my heart. And another sad thing is the hard parts that lead to hard questions. They're not the difficult type. Like in the calculus problems, these questions, these hard parts, they are hard to accept in a way because they cannot be defended logically in the first place. They're so irrational to the point your brain will just resist it. It's hard to believe because it's so absurd. And since Joyce mentions much earlier in the podcast that a worldview needs to be logical at the very least, it's safe to say that if you can't tie up loose ends like this, loving God, brutal God, merely running away when a hard question pops up, or saying,
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know.
and it's probably time to reconsider your beliefs. And be grateful you're being challenged. Having your beliefs questioned is an opportunity to inspect and see if you've really found the absolute truth, as you have so claimed. We cannot emphasize it enough. Again and again, from time to time, be like the Bereans. Examine the scriptures, even if the source of doctrine is the much revered Apostle Paul himself. Thank you for watching. If you like this content, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more free Bible materials and lessons.